We're back in the war room to decide who won this week's Wednesday night war between AEW Dynamite and NXT. My name is Michael Valenti. Joining me is Ralph Valenti. Ralph, we usually start with the opening match and go chronologically, but I think we have to talk about the main events first because there's a lot to talk about there. We get confirmation that FTR versus the Young Bucks is happening. Fans can finally rejoice at Full Gear for the AEW Tag Team Championships. Meanwhile, over on NXT, we get the return of Pat McAfee, who was behind all the attacks with the Undisputed Era. Ralph, I think we know FTR versus Bucks was coming. How surprised were you that Pat McAfee shows up as the man behind all the attacks with Undisputed Era?
I was actually very surprised. I thought they were going to go in an entirely different direction with that whole storyline, culminating with O'Reilly being the guy that was hiring either Ridge Holland or somebody to do these sneak attacks and things of that nature. Because I got the sense that after O'Reilly's strong performance against Finn Balor, we were going to get him trying to assert himself as the leader of the Undisputed Era. Now, obviously, I was off on that. Pat McAfee has returned. I find that to be something that was very interesting, not necessarily something that I was expecting at all. Certainly not last night on an episode of NXT.
Yeah, I totally agree. Was not expecting that at all. When I saw that McAfee was there, I was like, whoa. But I get it. Obviously, there's the backstory with him and Adam Cole. Their match at TakeOver 30 was probably the match of the night. Very, very good. And now it makes me wonder if this is the story that's going to be progressed for War Games, where we have Danny Burch and Oney Lorcan, who Pat McAfee helps win the NXT Tag Team Championships in the main event. It was supposed to be Roderick Strong and Bobby Fish, but due to the attacks, they're not part of the main event. Instead, it's Danny Burch and Oney Lorcan. So do you think we're heading to War Games with the Undisputed Era versus Pat McAfee and Bunch? And if that's the case, who is the fourth person?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you could have guessed that it was going to be Ridge Holland, but that's certainly not going to happen due to his injury. So they can certainly introduce maybe Ciampa. I mean, Ciampa's a guy who was a former champion, and since he's come back from his injury, aside from really his feud continuing with Johnny Gargano, they haven't really done a whole lot with him. So I know that him and Adam Cole certainly have some history, so that might be a way to tie him in. But it's going to be interesting to see how that whole thing develops in the weeks coming forward.
I agree, but I think it could be Finn Balor. Obviously, with the match between Finn Balor and Kyle O'Reilly heading into NXT TakeOver 31, and then this is going to be an interesting storyline heading into War Games, so I'm excited for it. But let's move on to the actual shows themselves. We start off AEW Dynamite with Wardlow versus Jungle Boy. And on NXT, you have the triple threat match that you already talked about with Kushida facing Tommaso Ciampa facing Velveteen Dream. The Wardlow match was the way it should have been booked. Jungle Boy trying to play David against Goliath, but Wardlow was just too powerful for him, too quick for him, and it was a 9.5 minute one-sided victory for him. Over on NXT, I thought this triple threat match was awesome. In my notes, I even went on to say that this could possibly be NXT's best TV match of the year. I thought it was that good.
Yeah, I thought the match on NXT was very good. And like I said earlier, I think the most surprising thing for that was just that Ciampa was the guy that took the pin from Kushida. So granted, he wasn't necessarily expecting it. He gave him the German suplex from behind into the bridge and pin. So I guess they could spin it that way. Again, Ciampa, it's just odd because he seems to be like a guy who's really kind of been left in limbo since his return. And I would have expected if anybody was going to take the pin in that match, it would have been Velveteen Dream because they really haven't done a whole lot with him. And I think they're scared to do certain things with him because of his whole situation and all of the allegations surrounding him. Over on AEW, I did think that match was good. I was actually surprised. I didn't think Jungle Boy was going to get that much offense in. I thought that Wardlow was going to be more dominant throughout the match. Jungle Boy would get one big comeback, similar to what you see sometimes, like what they do with Brock Lesnar and some of the matches and the way those matches are laid out in WWE. But overall, I thought both matches were good and made Wardlow look strong, which is important.
Let's move on to our next match. Well, segments really. On AEW Dynamite, we have Eddie Kingston and Jon Moxley cutting promos and backstage videos heading into their match at Full Gear, which is now an I Quit match. And over on NXT, it's Ember Moon in her first singles match since returning against Jessi Kamea. The Moon match was what it was. It's just an enhancement talent match. good for her. I do like the involvement with Dakota Kai afterwards. Eddie Kingston and Jon Moxley just cut amazing promos here. Kingston is probably the best promo in AEW right now. I think a lot of people would agree with me on that. What'd you think of these packages?
I thought the promos were great. I love the way that they're telling this story. I think that this fact that these guys have a history together certainly is helping progress the storyline. I like the way they're tying that in. I like the way that Eddie Kingston is trying to portray Jon Moxley as the guy that left them behind as he went on to advance his career. I think that's something that, we haven't necessarily seen in recent history. It'd be very easy for them just to say Eddie Kingston's going after Jon Moxley because, he's the pro wrestler and Moxley's the entertainer and all of those things. And I think they're tying that in, but there's a deeper story to it, which I like. Both guys cut amazing promos. Moxley has consistently cut good promos, especially when he's doing these video packages. So I'm definitely interested to see what happens with their I Quit match. If they can find a way out of that. I like the fact that this is an I Quit match. And Moxley even pointed out, look, you're going to have to say, I quit. Like there's not going to be any way out of it. You can't say I wasn't eliminated. You can't say I didn't tap out. You can't say I passed out and didn't give up. It's an I Quit match. So if Moxley's going to beat him, it involves Kingston essentially accepting that he's going to lose the match. So I like that. And yeah, I kind of, as you pointed out, Ember Moon, it was what it was. It was a match just to kind of progress her return and cement her return. And I think that involving Dakota Kai is a logical first feud, and looking forward to that too.
I'm looking forward to it too. I think Dakota Kai and Ember Moon could have a fantastic match. But let's move on to two segments here where I think one guy was booked perfectly and one guy continues the head scratching booking that I think we've seen for the last few weeks. Kenny Omega comes out as full blown heel, cleaner, arrogant jackass against Sonny Kiss, beating him in 19 seconds in the first round of the AEW number one contender tournament. Austin Theory continues his losing streak, loses not once, but twice to Bronson Reed. And then we later find out that Austin Theory has quit. So Ralph, first we'll talk about Omega. What'd you think of this?
Looked exactly as it should have been. I mean, I think that if he had gone on and had like a 10-minute, 12-minute match against Sonny Kiss, some people would certainly say, okay, well, we don't want to see squash matches. But look, Kenny Omega is Kenny Omega and Sonny Kiss is Sonny Kiss. Omega is the proven commodity in AEW. Sonny Kiss from time to time has had ups and downs. He has his critics, but he's unranked. Like he hasn't really accomplished a whole lot in AEW. So Kenny Omega theoretically should be able to come out and beat somebody like Sonny Kiss as quickly as he was able to. As for Austin Theory, interesting to see what happens with that. He continues his losing streak. It'd be interesting to see if somebody is going to come out and manage him and try to get him back on track, or if they keep him off TV entirely for a couple of weeks and try to rebuild him in a different way.
Yeah, I've seen people talk about the possibility of putting like a Zelina Vega Andrade combination with him. I think he could use a manager to help build him up a little bit more. I don't know who that's going to be. It'd be interesting to see where this progresses, or if they wrote him off to go back to the main roster.
Yeah.
That could be another possibility, but I don't know where this is heading. Either way, he's got to get back. He's got to get on a winning streak wherever it's going, or maybe they just wrote him off completely just to keep him off TV. That could be the other thing too. I don't know where this is going. So we'll see as time moves on, but let's move on to, I think, probably the most action-packed matches of the evening. For AEW Dynamite, it was Pentagon Jr. or Penta El0M facing Rey Fenix. And on NXT, it was the six-man tag Legado del Fantasma going up against Jake Atlas, Isiah Swerve Scott, and Ashantee the Adonis. I thought both these matches were good. They had some very good spots. I think there was some good storytelling in both of them, Ralph. I think the fact that they tried to keep Isiah Swerve Scott and Escobar separated, I think that was very good. And when they got them together, it was very short-lived. Some dangerous spots in both these matches. You had the head scissor from Red Phoenix where he landed on his head, and Jake Atlas doing the Spanish fly off the apron where it looked like he got caught in the apron and he might have landed on his head onto the floor. But I think these were probably the highlights of both shows for some people.
Yeah, I thought the Pentagon Phoenix match was was good. I thought that it was exactly what I expected it to be. I think there were certain moments in the match, like where they were standing in the middle of the ring trading chops. I know that's not everybody's thing. You know, it's kind of like you're going to get your critics with that. It's not everybody's cup of tea, as you would say, for the match itself. But I thought they delivered. It was exactly what I expected it to be. I thought that there were a couple of scary moments throughout the match. Not the scariest moment of the night, which I'll get into later, but I thought Pentagon and Rey Fenix delivered, and I'm certainly looking forward to Kenny Omega and Rey Fenix because we know that they have history in the past, and I think that's going to play in nicely to this match going forward. I did not like the tag match on NXT. I thought that there were a lot of issues with it. I thought there was a lot of standing around. There were two spots specifically, and you pointed them out. There was one point in the match where Swerve Scott did some flippy shit off the top rope, pretty much completely missed everybody standing outside of the ring, which they were waiting for the spot, which I'm critical of AEW when they do those things. And I don't like when NXT does it either. It's just so blatant that it's a predetermined spot that it takes away from the believability of the match for me. I don't like that they do that in current wrestling. There was that spot. You mentioned the Atlas spot with the botched Spanish fly, again, with people standing around outside the ring unnecessarily for no reason. I can't get into matches if they're going to do things like that. Like, I understand you want to protect the professional wrestlers, but it's either like, you know, can the camera guy go in a different spot so you don't blatantly see people just standing around and it's kind of like they're half looking and getting up and then randomly falling over to just stay in one spot. I could do without that, whether it's AEW or NXT. So AEW, Rey Fenix and Penta, good match. Swerve Scott and the other guys over there on NXT really wasn't into it all that much.
Let's move on to the next set of matches here. Our last match in the first round of the AEW number one contendership tournament, Hangman Page versus Colt Cabana. And on NXT, we had tag team action. Drake Maverick and Killian Dain go up against Everrise. I don't know about you, Ralph. Maybe it was just my DVR, but I noticed the audio was out of sync during the Hangman Page versus Colt Cabana match, and that was very distracting for me. Besides that, the match itself was good outside of the distraction. The Drake and Killian Dain story continues, and I think it was hilarious, especially when you got Drake Maverick finally channeling his inner anger, beating up on Everrise with the chair, getting disqualified. You have Killian Dain looking like he was pissed off because he just got disqualified and lost the match, but then goes up to Dain and goes up to Drake and says, "That was awesome. That was the best thing you've ever done in your life. That was awesome." This thing is really working. I think this is probably the best story that we've seen in NXT in the last couple of weeks.
Up until we got the reveal of Pat McAfee returning at the end of the night, I wrote, this is the most relevant thing on the show, and that's a problem right now because, you know, you've got guys out on injury. You've got Karrion Kross who's hurt. You have Finn Balor who's out on injury. Adam Cole wasn't there. Rhea Ripley wasn't there. Shotzi Blackheart wasn't there. So it wasn't like they were going out there and trying to steal the show. Yeah, you've got certain storylines like Austin Theory that's happening on a weekly basis, but you don't have that one big storyline. At least at this point in the show, they didn't have that one big storyline that, you know, really had you invested in it. If you watch AEW, you've got the tournament that you could pay attention to. You know, you have the 4-way tag match to look forward to, and you've got the steak dinner, which I'm sure we're going to get into in a little bit. So that was it's fine. I mean, I'm into the Killian Dain Drake Maverick thing as of now, but I don't think that's like your main storyline that you want people to watch your show based on. So the match itself was, you know, it was fine. I think the main point of this whole thing was just showing that these guys are starting to form some chemistry. I still think this is going to culminate with Dain doing that dance that Drake Maverick was doing at the end of the match. That's inevitable, I think.
I think so.
So there is that. Over on AEW, again, so the scary spot for me of the night, the scariest spot that I noticed was Hangman Page getting pushed off the top rope and essentially just going spine first onto the corner of the apron there on the outside. To me, that was a scary spot. I thought the match itself was actually good. I didn't buy Colt Cabana ever beating Adam Page, but you know what? It was a good match, and I thought it delivered. So hats off to those guys, I guess.
I mean, I think for the most part, I think we assumed outside of the Penta Rey match, we kind of knew who was going to win those matches. Yeah. It was pretty chalk. No one pulled an upset. So we progress to the next round, and we'll get Ray versus Kenny Omega, and we'll get Hangman versus Wardlow. Do they go with the Hangman versus Omega as we expect it to be? And how do they book Hangman to beat Wardlow next week? I'm interested to see that. But speaking of Wardlow, he is the bodyguard of one MJF, and let's talk about it. La Dinner Debonair. I've seen a lot of people loving this. I've seen a lot of people crapping on this. I am on the side of it was entertaining. I thought it was funny. But I could see where people could be pissed off and not like this spot.
Initially, I was conflicted. I didn't know how to feel about this. And then I thought to myself, well, have I seen similar things that I enjoyed? I know that right now, if I were to go on YouTube and search Kurt Angle and Steve Austin playing the guitars where they've got the hats and the badges, goofy gimmick. You've got the biggest badass in professional wrestling history, Steve Austin, with hats and badges and things of that nature, and Vince McMahon walking out. And it was a good segment. There were no issues with it. From a professional wrestling standpoint, if you're a wrestling purist, this is definitely not going to be something you're into. But if you're a business owner and you're a businessman, this is something that makes sense. Look, and let me put things into perspective for people. We're all locked in our houses for the most part. We go to work, we come home, there's quarantining, there's people that are sick, there's an unfortunate pandemic. Nobody's been happy in 8 months. We need something that's going to lift us up, something that's going to make us laugh, something that's entertainment. This is what I think that these are the types of things that I think people watch professional wrestling for. Like you watch TV and you watch wrestling and you watch sports because you want an escape. You want an escape from reality, whether that's 2 hours or 15 minutes, right? And I got that with this segment here. You know, it was funny. Mind you, Chris Jericho looked like he was going to pass out. He was as blue and red and bloated. Oh my God,
yes.
I mean, he looked like Brock Lesnar. If you've ever seen that where people legitimately were concerned, where Brock was like turning purple or blue in the middle of a match, Jericho legitimately looked like he was going to faint. I actually went in the other room and I brought my wife and I said, look, I need to get your thoughts on this. Do you think this is funny? Like, do you find it stupid? Like, what do you think? She goes, Chris Jericho looks like he's going to die. That was her main takeaway. But, you know, look, if they went out there and had a legitimate beef, like they sat down, they went face to face, or there was a contract signing segment or whatever, any of these stereotypical professional wrestling segments that you get on a weekly basis on any professional wrestling show. I saw a really good segment between Eric Young and Scott D'Amore on the from Impact. There was nothing wrong with that. Now, realistically, how far is that going to go? Can it get shared on social media, that segment, or a contract signing? And anybody that's not a professional wrestling fan, can they get into it? Would they start watching the show based on that? Not likely. For something like this, where it's different, it's funny, it's entertaining, that has the potential to go viral and reach people outside of just professional wrestling fan base. And that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to try things. You're supposed to try and take risks to grow your company and get additional eyes to your product. So from a wrestling standpoint, I'd probably shit all over this. From an entertainment standpoint and a business standpoint, if I'm a businessman, if I'm Tony Khan, this was great. It was good. It was good. It was well done and it was funny.
Right. I mean, there have been far worse musical segments and things that you can look up on social media or on YouTube or whatever that involve anybody. For example, you remember back in, I think it was 1987. I wasn't born yet, but I've seen the video of Vince McMahon dancing to the song Stand Back.
Terrible.
Yeah, this was better than that. But that's what it reminded me of most, was like, this is their Stand Back, but they did it so much better. And on Monday, we had the Elias Rock concert, which I thought was very, very good. So if you're liking that, I don't see how you don't like this unless you don't like Frank Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr. and you like rock music, which personally, I'm a classic rock fan over Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr., but I thought both of these things were great. These were really good. What's with the face? What's with the
Frank
face?
Sinatra's a fucking legend.
Yeah, so is Steve Perry and Freddie Mercury. What's your point?
Steve Perry,
Oh, don't give me that. Steve Perry's the best rock singer ever. Freddie Mercury's number 2. I don't want to hear anybody else. I'm sure I'm going to get buried saying, why didn't you say Robert Plant? But I stand by my stance. But All right, before we head to the ratings and who won, let's talk about the women's division. We did have 2 matches here on AEW Dynamite. Britt Baker, in her second match since returning from injury, beats KiLynn King in a pretty quick match. Xia Li against Kacy Catanzaro, where Xia Li must win this match. She must win this match. Yeah. She doesn't win. We don't know why she has to win this match. And quite frankly, I don't care. But Britt Baker looked amazing in this match. Amazing. For the second time in a row, she looks better coming off of injury than she did before she was injured.
Yeah, I agree. I thought Britt Baker looked really good. It's going to be interesting to see what they do with the women's division, because on a weekly basis, we typically get one women's match on AEW, and NXT is loaded with women, with the women's matches. And that wasn't necessarily the case this week. We got 2 on NXT. We got 1 on AEW. We haven't seen Thunder Rosa, which is, we haven't seen her in a while. Let's see where it goes. Is Britt Baker going to be the next contender? I don't know.
Well, right now she's ranked 5th, so she has to climb her way back up. But keeps racking up wins. She can be the number 1 contender. We'll see how it goes. I think that's where they're heading. I think we are heading towards Britt Baker versus Hikaru Shida at Full Gear, and Shida's going to get dethroned as the women's champion as Britt Baker. And I think the women's division needs it, not just because Hikaru Shida, I'm not saying Hikaru Shida is not a bad wrestler or anything. She's their best wrestler, hands down. But I think the women's division right now needs a character to get behind, and Britt Baker's it. Before we decide which show is better this week, let's go over the ratings. And this week, the ratings are the same for AEW Dynamite and the 18 to 49 demographic this week, getting a 0.30 just like last week. NXT was down in the 18 to 49 demographic, getting a 0.16 this week. In fact, it is for the 3rd straight week they missed the top 50 in the 18 to 49 demo. So we don't know their 50 plus demo. AEW Dynamite's was a 0.28. Total viewership for both shows are down. AEW Dynamite does win that one as well with 753,000 total viewers. NXT gets 644,000 total viewers. All right, so I think both shows had their ups and their downs this week, but I think AEW Dynamite, came more out with positives than NXT. I think there were a lot of times where I was losing focus and not really paying attention to what was going on in NXT. I just really didn't pique my interest. That triple threat match was very, very good. The tag match, the main event, was a decent match. The surprise from Pat McAfee was good. But I'm giving this week to AEW Dynamite.
Yeah, I got to agree. And it's surprising. I think that NXT certainly was, it had its moments, but I just, like you said, I just never really got into it. Like, it never piqued my investment until literally the last couple minutes where Pat McAfee came out. Now, granted, it was a big surprise. It was something that I didn't expect, but the rest of the show, there, like I said, you didn't have your big stars. You had a lot of guys that were left off the show, or some of the best women. Rhea Ripley wasn't there. Shotzi Blackheart wasn't there. Io Shirai wasn't there. Finn Balor wasn't there. So you had a lot of big names that were left off NXT this week. And then you got the Pat McAfee thing, which was probably the biggest moment of the night. AEW, there was again, it's the moments they have. They have that one good segment typically every week that leaves you wanting more. The Jericho and MJF thing to me was that segment. There was enough good matches. The tournament matches were good enough to keep me invested and pique my interest for next week. The tag match was what it was. I knew it was going to be this way. It was more or less like a roller coaster in your face, all over the place, kind of sloppy at times. And it had the logical outcome, but at least we're going to get the Young Bucks and FTR. Some could debate, is it too late for that? Like, is this now the peak of that rivalry? And, I think that's a fair argument to have, but I think that for me, AEW was the better show this week. Yeah.
So I think we're agreeing AEW Dynamite, but let us know in the comments which show you thought was better between AEW Dynamite and NXT. Don't forget to share us all over social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at SCPV Podcast. And to join the conversation, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications. For Ralph Valenti, my name is Michael Valenti. We'll see you on the next episode of the Squared Circle Psychobabble.